Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Well, Slava, how are you?
We are back, and I am doing okay.
That sounds confident.
It is a bright, chilly, undisclosed moment of the day and week in which we're recording this. And
Of course.
I am doing just fine.
It changes his story over here. At least he's the funnier one of us.
I pretend to be.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to tell you a story about strawberries?
Would you please regale us with such nonsense? Don't actually. No, don't actually. No, don't.
It'll be 20 minutes out of our already hour-long podcast.
Yeah. Any highlights this week?
Not particularly, man. Not particularly. It's been since we started this, and I started this new job. It all kind of melts together, maybe give or take a month. There's usually like a week or two of, like I said a few episodes ago, of little things every day, just kind of keeping you busy. And then there's the week or two of wrangling feral cats. This week was pretty easy, just plugged along. What about yourself?
Yeah, just keeping toward moving this event that I'm throwing together along, which is good. Yeah, I haven't been to the gym, I'm trying to get down to 200 pounds, like, can't break through, like, 205, but I'm also, like, not changing my diet entirely. I did, but then I didn't. It's just a whole thing.
Yeah.
So, not hitting my goals, not hitting the fitness goals, but, yeah, life's pretty keen right now.
I got you, man. Yeah. I've been dutifully working out every day for a while now, about a month or so, which has been great because nobody needs to tell this to anybody, because I think by now it should be public or common knowledge, that working out in the morning or doing some social, my goodness, I can't speak English again.
Yeah, doing some social in the morning.
Everyone
does that. They grab their phones.
Exactly,
and
yeah. No,
go.
Put your social down and do some sort of physical activity for at least a half an hour during the day. Walking, running, even light cardio sets you up for the day. Not that I needed a reminder, because in my 20s, I used to run actively, work out once or twice a week, like serious workouts, not just, I'll go to the gym and lift, 10-pound weights for 15 minutes. So felt good then, starting to feel better again.
I like it. Working out is good for the soul. Good
Oh, yeah.
for the soul. So after we read Stormlight Archives, Slava's going to have me read some Russian literature. He said we can start with something called the Communist Manifesto.
It's a great cyberpunk dystopian hellscape novel. It's a prelude to dystopian hellscapes.
I heard it was a prophecy book.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes it was.
We don't have to get into that.
A prophecy that lasted for 70 years.
All right, let's dive in. We're in sort of this middle section where things are just simmering in the Way of Kings. We had 2 episodes ago, we had some more action, and now it's kind of like, all right, we need to get some more threads in the story and the world, unravel a little more of the questions that are happening with Dalinar, Adolin, Kaladin. And we talked about this last time, I think, where we said Shallan was going to pop up again because we just haven't seen her in a hot minute. And so, of course, she's going to come into these new chapters. And last episode, we stopped with Bridge 4 getting chasm duty. And Kaladin shows his men what he can do with the spear and gets them all to shut the hell up because they're like, oh, he's probably not a real soldier. And then he just hits a trance and they go, oh, okay, we were wrong. Of course, they're bridgemen. They don't say that, but.
Well, and I realized what the word I was looking for was a drill. He goes through a drill, like a spear drill,
yeah.
and shows them his skills.
Makes sense. So we start 28 and chapter 28 with Dalinar and Adolin, and this is going to be the only Dalinar and Adolin chapter because cutting up the book was a little difficult on my first time through cutting it up because so many things happen, and it really is like a movie in my opinion, where you're jumping around, and I mean, you and I only have so much time because we have day-to-day lives and stuff, so getting through 10 chapters a session before, or 10 chapters per sprint before the next episode that we record is a little challenging. And that said, we're here with Adolin and Dalinar. Any comments on chapter 28 where Adolin is being kind of thrust into leadership and he's... Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. So Dalinar, he's going through a thing.
What kind of thing?
He seems to be... He wants to step away from his leadership post.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees that Adolin is good with the men. The men respect him. He does, the checks well. He leads them well. And he sees that maybe, possibly, and I'm thinking that's maybe because he was outmaneuvered in the previous chapter and he's going to be somewhat outmaneuvered in this. He's like, all right, I think I need to let Adolin take my place, and I'm just going to go back to my lands and relax, which is a 180 from where he was a couple of chapters ago, where he's like, what do these visions mean? I need to unite them. How do I do this? How do I protect the king? How do I protect my children? How do I maneuver, the political waters of this war camp, which is like a de facto kingdom now because of this unending, ridiculous war.
Kingdom.
And Sadius and the other high princes, he was processing all of that in the previous chapters and thinking, okay, this is how I got to do it. He's looking at the chessboard, he's making the moves in his head, and it seems to me, as a first-time reader, as soon as he gets outmaneuvered pretty heavily by the king and, I forget the guy's name, as always, he seems to have a change of heart, or at least a change of strategy, and he's like, Alan's going to be in front. He's going to take my place. He's trained enough, and smart enough, and dedicated enough to do it. I'm going to peace out. And he wants to think about it. He's like, I'm going to think about it, but probably by end of this time, whatever that's in his head, he's like, I'm going to abdicate and leave. So he's going through a thing.
Yeah. And part of his thinking in all of this, he takes a little siesta, if you will, throws on his shard plate, and then digs a latrine. Which
is a interesting little event, because he's thinking, and I forget how this got introduced, but he's thinking to himself, can't shard blade and shard plate be used for more common efforts, for more common uses? It's great to, cut Pershendi with it, and it helps in war, but what if the common folk can use it to
do their jobs easier? Yeah.
Do their jobs easier, right.
And he's wondering about the Knights Radiant and how, okay, they were these interesting people, but and they had these powers and these weapons and this armor and stuff, but where is the service to the people? And so he's thinking about that in terms of the weapons and the armor, but it's really this deeper question of, well, why are we serving the people the way that we're supposed to be serving, which is the way that a king should act, unlike the king is acting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where does authority come from, right? Yeah.
Matter.
So and he's thinking about this as he's digging this latrine, and I have a quote here highlighted. As Gallner continued to work, beats of his hammer throwing the chips into the dust, he easily did the work of 20 men. Sharp blade could be used for so many things to ease the lives of the workers and Dark Eyes across Roshar. So he's asking himself, where were the shards for ordinary men? Like these wise people who created these shards, why did they think of others besides themselves, or besides the Bright Eyes, Light Eyes,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the questions that comes up is, so Dalinar is under the belief that they made these weapons, right?
Yeah.
And far as we've seen and heard, no one has. Well, so there was this glimpse of something that was said earlier in the book that they are working on creating shields that can defend against shard blades, but they're early in the discovery stage still. It's like one line that happens earlier in the book. I don't know if you remember it. But
Vaguely, now that you bring it up.
yeah, so it's this idea of there's this lost knowledge that if these are created blades and created armor, then how did they do it? And they don't know. They don't know. So Dalinar's under this presumption that they are created items because I mean you create blades, you create
Right.
shields and arrows and other stuff. But there should be some lost, well, there should be some ancient texts that dictate, hey, this is what the blacksmith did, and then it became the shard blade, and da-da-da-da-da. So.
Yeah. And could that be, since it's covered in this section, could that be what Jasna is searching for in Taravangian's library?
Carbronth? Yeah, the Palanaeum. Well, no, and that's just... Yeah, all right, so your dad gets assassinated, right? Your dad is king, he gets assassinated. I mean, she might stumble upon it, maybe, but that's certainly not her
Main
direction
goal?
of scholarship. Yeah, direction of scholarship at this moment, far as we know,
Okay.
right? Like, your father gets assassinated, and then the people he was about to make a treaty with are like, yeah, we did it. And you're like, what? So, I mean, she's left with a lot of questions, which is an interesting place to be for someone who's so, I want to say non-emotional, but Yasna can be emotional. It's just not, it is the same way that she is with everything else. It is under her control. So I do look forward to a time when Yasna does lose her control over her emotions. Yeah. I am trying to think if any of the other books have something like that, but I don't remember. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, go to my assumption from one of the previous episodes is that Shallan will be unsuccessful in her attempt to steal the Soulcaster. And to your point now, connecting the two, maybe that will precipitate Jasna's uncoming emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
I wanna deviate here real quick. Do you think that Sanderson will kill any of his characters?
Yeah.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that later. Okay.
I do.
All right.
Yes. Well, because I read another Sanderson book where there were people killed. There were main characters.
Rip.
Yeah. So, yeah, why not? Let's kill some main characters. Make it a sad story.
All right. Okay, let's move on to these interludes. They seem out of place, right? Is that fair? I want to know what's your take on these?
I guess so. I don't know. They're interludes.
Run me through.
They're not connected to the rest of the story, but neither were the first set of interludes, right? Not directly, at least. So the first one is Risen, and she is helping, or she's a ward or an assistant or something to that effect, of a merchant. And they are waiting to meet the Shin, which I've heard that name before in Sanderson's work, I think. So I'm wondering...
Zeth is Shin. Zeth is from the people of the Shinovar.
Right, that too. So
we see in the Risen interlude that her Bapsk, which is like her mentor, right?
Yeah.
Who is a tradesman, a merchant. Not tradesman, a merchant. Although merchant, I would say that's probably a trade in Roshar. He mentions Zeth, not by name, but he actually does mention him. He's like, hey, do you have any more of those servants with the oath stones? And they go, no, we couldn't have even sold them to you because that's the culture. They trade in a very specific way. So
you're right. Yeah. So anyway, Risen and her mentor they meet some Shin, and they do an exchange. And the thing that stood out to me was Rizen's reaction and thoughts on the soil and the grass that's in this part of the land. It's different than what she has experienced, I guess, with grass and plants and soil. And so there's this little exchange of goods between the Shin and her mentor, and Risen finds them a little bit odd, but her mentor says, well, they're not odd, they're just different than us, and, they're actually good people. And then it kind of ends on her going and grabbing enough to fill a pot of the grass that she was exploring in the beginning of the interlude, and just kind of ends there. So just a very, very simple, seemingly out of place, as you said, interlude.
So, I have to double check this before I say it, but one of the reasons that it seems weird to her is that the land that she's on and the Shin themselves, I don't know if you remember Zeth talking about the heresy of people who walk on stone.
Yes.
So their culture is, and then even in I think it was his interlude actually here, where he questions like, well, maybe walking on stone is okay because these people don't have grass. They don't have soil.
I made that connection. I was going to bring it up when we got to his interlude, but yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's all tied together here, so
yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, perfect. No, it's all good. Yeah, so the grass and the ground that she's walking upon, is it no different than, regular grass and ground and soil? Or is it so different that it confuses her? So I guess the question here in my mind is, are these people, meaning Risen and her mentor, do they only walk on stone? Is there like a lack of grass and soil because of the high storms or because of just the area they're from? And how does that tie into Seth's culture or the Shin culture? Do they not have any stones anywhere? Like that just seems interesting. And as Sanderson does often, he just writes something in, and you're kind of left wondering, oh, okay, well, that's kind of an odd thing or an interesting part of the culture that he's describing.
Yeah, it's fun to see the very short stories unravel, where it's like, oh, what does this mean? And then it's just another connection. Oh, okay, so Rizen's Bapsk is part of the lineage that held Zeth as a servant in his Oathstone. Interesting. Okay. And it doesn't sound like he did anything malicious with him, but just that he was the initial person who did get Zeth as a slave, a servant, slave, Oathstone servant, truthless, and then kind of released him into the world here.
Yeah, and if he's the best servant he ever had, why did this guy trade him?
Sometimes you don't know what you have before it's gone, right? I mean, have you ever had that in
fair.
life where
yeah,
life was really good and then something changed and you went, oh, damn, that was actually a lot better than I thought it was?
Yeah, no, that's fair. But my again, my curiosity is in the weeds there. Like, what happened? Was it just a convenience thing? I'm done with you. Well, I don't need you anymore. Or was it something else? Because if truthless are the bottom of the rung, and maybe that has something to do with it, or maybe Zeth's unflinching loyalty and uncompromising obedience.
Duty?
I guess, yeah, to
Culture,
his duty.
Yeah.
Maybe that was like, all right, guy, you're great, but you're kind of weird. Maybe, is that what happened? But in any case, whatever happened, Zeth got traded.
He did.
And you're saying that this guy was the first one to own Zeth? Or was he just part of the line of owners?
He's the first person to own Zeth outside of the Shin, from
Okay.
what we read, where he says, they talk about, I don't have the Kindle book in front of me, but they talk about how he says, do you have another one of those servants? And they're like, no, he was truthless. Like, we couldn't sell him for anything because of what their culture believes and holds fast to. So,
all right. So that interludes ends, and then we get to Axes the Collector.
Yeah, what is this all about? What is this guy doing?
Well, apparently he's studying Spren, in very odd ways.
Uh-huh.
And I found this interlude funny.
It's so different. It just pulls you out of everything else going on. There's this war and these people fighting and bridge forward, da-da-da. And then I got drunk trying to find ale spren. I think I saw him, but I'm not really sure because I was drunk. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when he wakes up naked in the alley, he says blight it all. So that's a different type of swear than we're used to, right? Or curse word. So that was one of the things that immediately tells the reader, all right, this is an interlude within an interlude almost. It's completely different than everything else we have read. And his interaction with like the homeless guy in the alley who's quite obviously insane is very, very funny.
I mean,
I like it.
Do you know many homeless people who are normal? Nothing against them, but you don't usually end up there without some sort of peculiarity.
This guy has built a kingdom out of garbage.
Different.
This guy's a different type of insane.
One man's trash is another man's treasure.
There you go. Yeah, and he does have the finest alleyway in Cassiter.
Yeah,
so that's good for him. But yeah, so this guy, actually the collector, is studying Spren, and he has this memento thing going with him where he like writes what he knows or what he collects, the information he collects about Spren. He like tattoos on himself or writes on himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, he wakes up naked, talks to a crazy person, steals the crazy person's, or he doesn't really steal it, but he gets the crazy person to give him a blanket to wrap around himself because these people in Cossiter don't like naked people walking on their streets. They're particularly
Why not?
Get upset about it. And so he's walking around with a blanket and getting some stares, but seems to be getting out of his predicament. And just as he's, collecting his thoughts and figuring out what's going on, and okay, Spren, what am I going to call him? These Spren that come out when you're drunk. Okay, I'm going to call him Ale Spren. As he's going through his little thing. As he's going through what he has learned or thinks he's learned while he was drunk, some guy runs up to him, rips the blanket off of him. He's left naked in the middle of the street, and the guards come and arrest him. He's like, all right, well, I've been arrested before.
Sounds like Vasher.
Yeah, exactly. Funny, Vasher thought. Well, maybe Vasher should be clothed more often.
Maybe Vasher should be hunting Spren.
Maybe that. Yeah, so he gets arrested and taken to, the city jail, I assume. And that's where that one ends.
Would you read a short novel about this guy wandering around looking for Spren? Does he remind you of anybody else in the story we've met?
Does he remind me in The Way of Kings?
Yeah. He reminds me of Wit.
Okay. I didn't make the connection, but I can see it.
Right? Just kind of peculiar, not in a bad way, but peculiar as in knows exactly where he's going, but for himself, and other people don't necessarily. So I read it and I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of Wit.
Yeah, well, his interaction with the crazy homeless guy, he just plays with it, right? He just goes right along with the crazy guy's ramblings, and like that head of rotting cabbage was the god's temple. I am so sorry I slept on it. That is yep, my bad. So
I killed a family of 4. What?
I love it. So moving to the next interlude, which is called The Work of Art
with Zeth.
Yeah, this is a good one. So Zeth San Villano, Truthless of Shinovar, has now a better master, and he's back to killing. And by better master, I mean this master doesn't make him pour beer in his head and cut himself. So that's saying a lot, actually, I guess.
Well, true.
Yeah. So he goes to kill a competitor of Makek, who owns, I guess, like an ale house or a gambling house.
Yeah, he's been collecting. He wants to be his own little town lord for the gambling dens.
So he goes to kill this guy's competitor, and he gets to the room where this guy's supposed to be, and there's a mysterious man there who's already killed the guy and killed Makek, and tells Zeth, are you happy what you're doing there, buddy? Just killing for meaningless, killing without a purpose, basically is what he says, and shows him that not only has he killed his current master, but he has the Oath Stone and tells him that your new master, our master, wants you to go on a couple of missions, and you're going to kill these guys. And Zeth realizes, oh, I'm in a bad place because these guys know how to use me properly. And the men that they're going to get me to kill, this is going to cause wars and strife and upheaval in the land.
Yeah, it's about to get... So, we've seen some action before, but now we're starting to see, oh no, someone has released a demon on the land by taking control of Zeth. We saw him kill Gavilar in the prelude, or the prologue.
Yeah.
We've seen him just endlessly following his orders, regardless of what they are, outside of his two, he can't give up his shard blade, and then he can't kill himself. So things are about to get spicy. Who do you think owns Zeth at this point? Like, who just... Have we met this person? Is it someone else? Is it the person? Is it one of the people that Gavilar mentioned in his prologue? He said, "Did so and so send you?"
The only thing I have highlighted is glories, Zeth thought. These are some of the most powerful people in the world. 6 high princes, the king of Jakaved. And so the figure tells him, this man, it's time you stopped wasting your talent. So that's all I had highlighted for my notes. So I'm not sure. It could be somebody that we've met or that was mentioned in the book. Maybe it was the people that even had Gavilar killed, because they certainly know about the murder.
The Parshendi.
Yeah, well, I don't think these guys are the Parshendi, or maybe they are, because who knows?
Came back to get their really great weapon that is death.
Because the Parshendi could have taken credit for this because they were working with whoever this guy is, this master who's now in charge of Zeth. So there could have been a connection there, and the Parshendi took the credit because it suited them, or they thought it suited them.
Right.
But I don't know. I think I'll go with this. I'll go with this answer. I think that we haven't met them, but they might have been mentioned in the book already.
Interesting.
But that's all I got.
So, like, they've been mentioned, but we haven't been shown the connection.
Right. Either that, or they haven't been mentioned, but there is a connection. Like here's how I'm going to say it. They haven't been mentioned, but on a second read through, our reader could go, "Oh, that's the connection." That's
one of those
where...
little, yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah. I'll go with that.
I mean, that's a fair.
So we
Sorry, go for it.
No, you go, because I was gonna segue to the next part. So
okay. I was gonna say that's honestly a fair assessment, and even maybe a cop out, where it's like, well, I believe that Sanderson maybe threw in a line here and there that on a second or third read through I would notice something. It's like, it's a good answer, but I'm like thinking about it more. Like, I mean, you could say that about everything, and you'd be right
sure.
half the time. Yeah. It's like saying in history class, what's the answer to this? George Washington. And 50% of the time, you'll be right.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And it is a cop-out to some degree, because I don't remember if anything was mentioned in what I read so far that makes the connection. Having some sort of semblance of how Sanderson puts together stories now, being 3 books in, I can see how it's just a throwaway line somewhere that I missed. But gun to my head, honest answer, I do not think we have met these people. This is an introduction of new characters in the book. How about that? That's my direct answer.
That's fair. All right.
Yeah.
On to Shallan, huh?
On to Shallan. As the interludes end, we get into chapter 29, called Error Gans, and we are back with our buddy Shallan. And she is now a couple weeks into her wardship, and she seems to be enjoying the wardship. She's learning things. She's getting her academic, scholarly itch scratched, but she's constantly battling the other side of her, which says, hey, you're not here to learn history. You're here to steal a soulcaster and save your family. So she's going through that in her head. Then there's this Ardent that comes by that's keeps trying to convert Jasna and is really bothered. Not that I believe him, but really bothered by Shallan's proximity to Jasna, and he's worried for her soul, and he wants to make sure that Shallan is okay. But he's a bit insufferable. So
you don't like Capsule?
Nah, he rubs
remind
me the
you of
wrong way.
people you've known in the past.
Yeah, he is annoying.
Slava,
There's something about him that annoys me.
Slava, I'm just here to make sure that your soul is okay.
Yeah,
I don't want you to follow the passions.
I find his arguments, as somebody who's went to seminary and is a Christian, I find his arguments for the existence of a deity, irrespective of what deity you're arguing for, I find his arguments lacking. That's part of the story. I understand it. I'm a big boy. I can think abstractly, and I can think in categories, thank God. But just him, like his whole being, right? And this goes back to what I've said so many times now. I like how Sanderson writes characters, and this guy, I just don't like him.
Right.
And it's not like I hate him. Like,
why?
He's not skeevy or anything. He's not a bastard.
He's not like Gaz, right?
He's not like exactly.
Yeah,
he's not
Gaz.
skeevy.
But why do you not like him? What is it about? Let's unpack this character. Like, he's not a main character, right? But he's clearly relevant to a main storyline.
Yeah, I don't find him authentic, and I know that word gets thrown around so much in our modern context. Like, are you authentic? Are you genuine? Like, well, yeah, people like authentic, genuine people, duh. As I read his interactions with Shallan, especially in this section of the book, I'm like, dude, you're weird.
Is he just trying to sleep with Shallan?
Are Ardents allowed to bed their congregants or people?
Allowed is a weird way to put it, because just because someone's not allowed to do something isn't going to stop them from doing it.
Oh, fair. Yeah, obviously.
I think there was a line where Shallan's like, and it's one of these, small pieces that just kind of, oh yeah, and then you read past it. But it's something like, she started to see him as a romantic interest, and she's like, but they can't do that, and then she like moves on. So
yeah,
the answer is
Shallan,
no.
though, right?
Yeah, she's not a very confident character as is, but just curious on your read for Capsule for whatever might unfold between him and Shallan or whatever. So
I don't know enough about Capsule yet. What I see is, I'll give him this. Here's what I'll give him. I believe that he believes what he says he believes.
Okay, that's fair.
I don't think he's some sort of
just like Jasna believes
creeper.
what she believes.
Yeah.
So
he's convinced
conviction?
of his position.
Sure.
Is that
conviction?
Okay. Yeah. So he's convinced of his position, and he's doing what he's doing because that's what you do as an Ardent. That is his job. That is his duty, and he's doing what comes naturally to Ardents, what he's been told to do. His devotary being one of the smallest, so he even admits, yeah, we try to recruit more than others, even though that's kind of frowned upon because they're really small. And it's our job as Ardents to care for the people of the Almighty. I believe that he honestly, that's his honest opinion. He really, truly believes what he says. Just the way he comes across, kind of weird.
Well, I
find it a little bit insufferable. And again, I'm probably being triggered by people like him I met in real life.
Yeah, he's a good character. Like, he's a well-written character, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Because especially from your history of going through seminary and meeting folks like this, it's just like, and it's not even like specifically Christian, but like in every religion, you meet somebody like this, and it's like, well, this is a not a stereotype. I mean, I guess you could call it that, but just like, I would almost call it an archetype of the zealot, like a zealot archetype, right?
Yes, because I've met more than just Christians in my seminary experience.
Well, maybe more, maybe less a zealot. I feel like zealots are a little more dogmatic and authoritarian in their actions, where they take physical action upon heretics. So maybe zealot is too much. Sorry, keep going.
So yeah, and I've met Muslims like this. I've met Jewish folks like this. I've met, New Age, whatever,
Hare
I met
Krishna.
all sorts of people in my life, pre, during, and post seminary, whether they were religious, a-religious, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, whatever the hell that means. Whatever stripe of that, you fall into, you always have this archetype. That's a good word. You always have this guy or this gal that believes wholeheartedly, is convinced of their position, which is not wrong. I'm not saying that being convinced of your position is somehow better than just, being a lackluster. We can't know anything ever, and that's the great part of life because nothing matters. Like, shut up. So, like, he's convinced of his position. That's great. The way he goes about interacting with people, do better.
Do Slava's wisdom for today. Do better. There's a psychologist that I like who one time said, sometimes you try your best and you did do your best and it wasn't good enough because your best is not always good enough. You can do your best and still fail because you need to grow in that area, whatever. I think that we see that both in our lives and in the lives of some of these characters where they try their best. Shoot, this might happen to Shallan. She's trying her best right now. She's doing the impossible compared to her very sheltered upbringing, and her best might not be good enough. She might, just like you said, fail at what she's doing.
Yeah, and I like Shallan. Shallan's a character I like.
I'm going to start a list of characters that you like that may or may not be relevant to main storylines. Just Ciri.
Please do.
Shallan. Okay. You also like Nightblood.
Nightblood's my man. Or whatever he's a sword or she's a sword, but I think it's a he.
Type 4 cognizant being. What is it? I'm going to look it up.
Ciri and Shallan. Those are two characters out of Sanderson's 3 books that I read that I really like. That doesn't mean that I hate the other characters, but they're the ones that I'm really interested. I'm really interested in their story more than the others. Like, I know a couple of episodes ago, I said, I'm interested in Cal's story. I want to know everything. And that's still true. But the more I get a glimpse into Shallan's brain, I'm like, all right, I want to know where this girl is going to go in the story, more so than anybody else. And you can hassle me. I'm not crying about the hassles.
Type of investiture. I can't remember. I want to say it's a type 4, but there's and honestly, this is one of the things I love about Warbreaker, is it's the end of the book, and then Vasher goes through this very scholarly breakdown of investiture. And honestly, that's relevant to the rest of the Cosmere, and you should take note of that.
Me personally or listeners?
Everyone.
Or both.
And this is honestly why I believe that Warbreaker is the book to step into the Cosmere with, because it lets you go both directions. It's good enough. Sanderson's writing is mature enough in Warbreaker for you to go, oh, this is fun. But then you read The Way of Kings, and Warbreaker technically happens after The Way of Kings, but it's on a different planet, and so it's kind of irrelevant.
Well, to your point, I was interacting with somebody online, and the OP was asking advice for kind of understanding the Cosmere, and I told them, start with the War of Kings. At least I told them that's where I would start, because it's a good baseline. Then I told them to go Coppermine the Net, and where there's heavy spoilers.
Yeah, it's a Type 4 biochromatic entity. I was close. So, Type 4 entities, Nightblood in particular, are sentient objects made by awakening inorganic material like metal or stone. So, Type 4 entity.
Very cool.
Anyway, back to The Way of Kings and Shallan.
Yeah.
What else does Shallan go through in her arc in this section that we're covering? Give us some more synopsis.
Well, she talks to her brothers via
Spanreed.
Thank you. Which I found fascinating just as a technology.
It almost feels like sci-fi.
There's a sci-fi element to it. Yeah. It's definitely fantasy though and magic at the same time, because you have special paper or special spren or special quills. Anyway, so she talks to her brother, one of the family members, non-blood family members,
non-Balat,
from the house is dead. That's not his name though. His name begins with an L.
Oh, her oldest brother?
No, somebody died in the house, and it wasn't one of the brothers. It was
Oh, you mean whatever his name is. Anyway,
yeah. So he dies, and he's the only one that
Lamoureux.
knows
No,
Lamoureux.
that's
There you go.
no. That's
Lamoureux dies too, and good riddance for that piece of crap. Yeah, that guy.
Luesh.
He dies. He dies, and he's the only one in the family in the house that could use a soulcaster. And as soon as he dies, people come by and start asking for the soulcaster and start asking about the dad, kind of indirectly. It's like, hey, your dad, you're right. Okay, he's traveling or whatever you're telling us. We really need the soulcaster, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So the brothers tell Shallan a brother tells Shallan that things are getting real. Things are getting dangerous. We need that soulcaster. And so that's another moment in Shallan's.
So Luesh dies. The guys who own the Soulcaster have popped by. Non-Palat says they're dangerous, and then he makes a point to draw a symbol.
Yeah, that he saw on
one of their thumbs, and also Luesh had a pendant of the same symbol.
Right.
What is this about?
Yeah. So there are things that their dad was involved, obviously, that were probably at least well, I don't want to say illicit, but they weren't they were not on the up and up. He was involved with some folks. It's obviously their soulcaster, or at least it seems that way to me, because why would they care if he still has the soulcaster?
Yeah, why would they care?
If it was his,
how would they know?
How would they know? So this guy who's dead, Luesh.
Clearly not a cheap device either, a soulcaster.
Right. That Luesh is the only one in the house who could use it. Was he a plant by these people? Did the dad know he was a plant? To what extent did the dad know what he was involved in? Was he just doing it for the money and didn't care? Again, to what extent did he care, not care? To what extent did he know or not know? Something's going on. And the people who, seems this way to me, the people who obviously were heavily involved in whatever her dad was doing and most likely gave him the soulcaster have realized something is up, and they came back and said, all right, we need the soulcaster back. Again, me reading into it, making an assumption, you're defaulting on your bills, haven't heard from you in months. Give us the soulcaster back. We're done with this nonsense.
Right.
So that, lights a fire, I suppose, to some degree under Shallan. And now she needs to up her game or up her efforts to get the soulcaster. And at the same time, she goes back to what she was thinking before, like, I really like studying. Jasna is good to me. All this stuff. She's enjoying her life as a ward because she sees the benefit to her. This wardship is good for her, but she's not there for the wardship. She's there to steal the soulcaster. And then towards the end of this this part of the story, Shallan has a moment where her conscience starts eating at her. Can she really steal from a person that's been this good to her?
Yeah.
And despite this person being a heretic, she is a good person. She is good to Shallan. She is not the witch that people have made her out to be, even if she is blunt and sometimes could be abrasive. She is fair. She is stern but fair, Shallan says. And so how could I steal from this person who's been good to me? Like, is it worth saving my family to do this deed? And so Shallan is struggling through.
Let's go on a side quest here, because we all encounter folks like this where, regardless of how you were raised or brought up, you meet folks that are outside your belief system and culture and ethics and et cetera, your set of values, and they are the other, right? Tribalism runs deep in humankind. For those listeners, tribalism would be the idea that there's an in crowd and an out crowd, and your crowd is the in crowd, and the others are the out crowd. One key example of this would be slavery in America. Like, whites are the in crowd and blacks are the out crowd. Another would be the Sunni and the Shiites. Whichever one you're born into is the in crowd, and the other one is the out crowd. So on and so forth.
Another word for it would be clannish. Like people act
Clans.
clannish.
Yep.
So even within the within tribalism, you will have your in and out groups too, and nobody outside that clan, that family clan, is allowed in.
Right. So I bring this up because we all meet people like this. We are the in crowd, and other people are the out crowd. How do we deal with that? How do we? Shallan is dealing and wrestling with her upbringing. She's being trained by a heretic, according to her beliefs. And she's realizing, this person's not as bad as I thought. This person isn't as bad as I was told she was. She's actually very fair and very kind. And now she's like, the crime she was going to commit against her when she saw her as a monster because she was a heretic. And we do this where we make the other into a monster because then it justifies our actions against them. We do this to prisoners too, where, oh, well, they're a monster. And it's like, yeah, they did actions that were monstrous, but they're still human, and this like speaks to human depravity. Charles Manson, right? Like, key example, who did monstrous things. And so people, I want him dead, whatever. I think rumor had it that he became a Christian or something like that, where he turned his life around or whatever. But like, okay, this person's a monster, and so if you go deep enough down this rabbit hole, you could start to ask questions like, is the death penalty valid as a consequence for someone's monstrous actions? But is it ever okay to turn someone into a monster? Hitler, another great example of someone who did monstrous things. When does humanity become monster? And what do we do about people like that? Because someone like Shallan hasn't killed anybody, as far as we know. And, sorry, Yasna. Did I say Shallan? I think I said Shallan. Yasna. Yasna hasn't killed anybody, as far as we know. And so it's like, she's a monster in the world according to culture because of religion, but Shallan is having this moment of conscience, like you said, where it's like, she didn't do anything to her. She's been very kind. She's a wealthy woman who took under her wing basically this podunk girl who was wealthy in Podunk Town, but like clearly not wealthy.
I think you're talking about Dahmer. The rumor is that Dahmer became a believer.
Was it Dahmer?
Manson. Yeah, Manson was never.
Okay. Something like that. Thanks.
So, right. Here's what...
It's a big side quest. It's a big...
Yeah. It's a big one. So here's my 2 cents. I agree with you. And I'll share a conversation I had. So when George Floyd died, because he was killed by the cops in Minneapolis, St. Paul? Yeah, Minneapolis or St. Paul?
Sounds right.
It was in Minnesota. Yeah. So I had the conversation with a friend of mine, and he dismissed it as just, well, fecal matter passes, man. He was a criminal and he was on fentanyl. And I was like, I'll give you that. Okay. How does that excuse the actions of the police officers?
Right. Yeah. Personal responsibility still applies regardless of,
right.
other people's actions. Yeah.
I am not opposed to the death penalty, but I am opposed to treating criminals, irrespective of the level of their monstrosity or monsterness, to make up a word, despite the level of their crime. The punishment should be executed, no pun intended. The punishment should be executed well, right, with some dignity. And I know people will get, sand in their britches because they might be so ardently against the death penalty, and there's discussion there. But whether you are in prison or you are on death row or you're being arrested, outside of very mitigating circumstances, you should always be treated like a human being. Just because you're arresting a criminal doesn't give you the right to just, take a couple of baton shots to the face. Well,
right,
just for kicks. And people do that. It's not like that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Soren. Don't at me. I don't care.
So I want to try to make this question, this side quest, harder. So the Nuremberg trials, right? There's a line. There's actually a line that internationally we have drawn in the sand that when crimes against humanity happen, that is when someone becomes a monster. That's how I would read it, right? So For those not in the know, the Nuremberg trials, I'm going to really summarize this, so feel free to add me in the comments if you want to like dive into it, because I bet you know more about it than I do. The Nuremberg trials happened after World War II. World War II? World War I? World War II.
World War II.
So Hitler, the Nazis, Germany was defeated, and they rounded up all of the Axis representatives who were defending Nazi Germany, and they put them on trial. The Allies, the people who won the war, put them on trial for crimes against humanity. Because, if you didn't know, they were doing experiments on top of just Holocaust camps. They were doing experiments on people and things that, if you read, were atrocious. I think it's Sector 731 or something like that happened over in, it was like Japan, China during World War II as well, that we stopped, which is another horrific thing that happened where they were doing tests on people. But the Nuremberg trials happened. It was proven, and then this line in the sand got drawn where we started to say, hey, this is the line. Humanity is defended by a legal shield that if crimes against humanity happen, we can do something about it. And then, to me, that makes it say that if you cross this line of crimes against humanity where you have enough power to commit crimes against humanity, because I think that there's an underlying state that you have to be in to have the power to commit crimes against humanity, at least at this, like if we're using this as a data point, then that's when you become a monster, which is why I think that Hitler could be labeled a monster, or Marx or Mussolini, or, a lot of these other people who had power, who literally committed crimes against humanity because of the number of folks that they killed and the way that they did it, if you will. Now, I'm making a bunch of broad strokes here, but...
Yeah, so what's your question? Was just a...
Well, so I started off by proposing that when we turn humans into monsters, we dehumanize them to justify our actions against them, and then I do agree with what you said about personal responsibility. Like, it doesn't matter if he was on fentanyl. The variables of circumstances do matter to a point. However, as the person in power, it is your job, and Dalinar shows us this well, that when you have power, you are supposed to lead by servanthood. Period. Like, that's your job. It doesn't mean you don't make tough calls. It means that you're supposed to serve the people. Which is why when we see him hacking away at this latrine, and he's literally shoveling shit, or what soon will be, like, he's doing the job of a quality leader. So I'm trying to kind of find the question to make what you've said harder, where it's like, okay, there is a line for someone becoming a monster in international terms, but I have lost my question.
Let me jump in and maybe we'll come back to you. I think we'll have to be careful about categories, because how I might feel about somebody I disagree with politically is different than what I feel about Hitler or Stalin or Jeffrey Dahmer or the Atlanta Monster, one of the few black serial killers, like, who killed little boys in Atlanta. So different categories, right? So Shallan having animosity towards Jasna, who she doesn't really know, but just based on religious convictions, let's call it, she finds Jasna, at least her beliefs, objectable. Yep. Right? Like, and Jasna as somebody who does not deserve maybe respect for denying the Almighty. That's different than the Allies coming together and saying, this is the line that we're drawing. This is what makes you a monster. Or even the crime itself, somebody who rejects their religion in a culture that holds the religion at the center of everything that they know and do is different than somebody murdering 11 million people. And to me, that's different categories. And without objective truth, who the hell cares then?
So, yeah. So you take the rabbit hole, and we won't go down this side quest at the moment, but that's a fair point, is who is to say... I think it throws the Nuremberg trials into this gray area. If you don't agree that objective truth exists, then how can you stand on an argument that has validity to object to someone's actions? And that's actually like a philosophical state. I want to bring us back to the story, because I've taken us down a very long side quest here. But I would agree there's a line between crimes against humanity and simply choosing not to be a part of your own religion anymore in the culture that you were raised in. But bringing it back to a softer question, if I can, is how do we grow in curiosity, which allows us to make space for the people that are the Yasnas in our life, where they're the out crowd. That's not what we do in our culture. It's like, yeah, but they're not a monster who's committing crimes against humanity, even if you might feel that way, because they haven't killed anybody. They haven't, taken power and done experiments on them, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I think from a Christian perspective, or a Judeo-Christian perspective, however you want to slice that, understanding that your fellow human being has worth, right?
Yeah, that's part of the objective belief system and foundation, is that human beings are made in the image of God, and therefore they hold value.
Right. So if your fellow human being who you disagree with has worth, and you find what they teach or what they believe to be wrong, that's okay. And I know that sounds like, like dad talking to a 5-year-old. That's really okay.
Well, we have to do that today. I think we really there's things that are happening in society that are just kind of nonsensical, and part of that is that we aren't allowed to tell people they're wrong anymore. And I'm not taking a stance on what is right or wrong at the moment, as much as like, if you can scream, I want tolerance, and then on the opposite side, when someone says, well, I don't agree with your threshold of tolerance, and then you get upset with them, like, that's just common discourse,
Right, exactly. And you hit it the nail on the head. Like, when it's okay that somebody has a different opinion than you. It's okay that somebody
you like
is
blue,
of a
I
different
like green.
religion.
Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah, it's okay that somebody has a different religion than you. And I have a Muslim friend who actually, now that he pops into my head, I haven't talked to him in a while, but I have a Muslim friend, and he knows that I'm a Christian. I know that he's a Muslim. We talk theology all the time. He believes that I'm in the wrong. I believe that he's in the wrong.
Yeah.
We're still friends. We have lunch. We banter. We talk about our wives. He tells me about his kids. We are genuine friends.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out to lunch once with I
think you told me this
a
story.
coworker. Yeah, we went out to lunch once with a coworker, and we're not even talking religion. But the coworker, who is a-religious, his self-designation, he just found it so interesting that we both could be such good friends, despite being from two different religions. And he said, so do you guys believe that you worship the same God? And without missing one beat, we both said at the same time, no. And it really took him for a loop. And, and we're just like, no, but that doesn't change anything. Like, both of our religions tell us, inform us that the other guy is made in the image of God, has worth, has value, and it's my duty to be a friend to him, whether or not we want to convert each other. Like, that's not even the conversation. Like, this is,
right.
That was part of the part of the conversation that was happening. Was that's not the deal. We're not friends with each other so we can convert each other. We're friends because we found common interests. We get along well. We clicked when we met the first time, and we just stayed friends. And when the conversation does go into the religious realm, we argue, we debate, we push each other. We, philosophically and theologically, we push buttons. We try to get at the bottom of things, but it's all done with respect, and nobody cries, nobody hits anybody. It's just two guys.
Yeah,
having
public
a conversation.
discourse. Yeah,
public discourse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so coming back real quick, and I think I'll end the side quest if you don't mind with this is
yeah.
If you treat as Shalon, if you're able to see Jasna as a fellow human being, as a fellow Rosharian, and understand that, like, oh, okay, yeah, she might be absolutely wrong for being an atheist, and her abrasiveness towards the ordinance is awful. But you know what? She's still a decent person. At the end of the day, she is not pulling legs off live animals. To bring, like, I know, ha ha ha, but there's a guy, there's your brother. Shalon.
That's your brother. Right.
So, he might believe in the Almighty, but he rips Almighty's creatures' legs off while they're still alive. So just treat human beings who disagree with you with the same, respect that you'd want to be treated with. And I know it sounds so silly. Like, it sounds like, the dad podcast Make sure you're nice to to the weird kids in school, Johnny.
I think we need the reminder though on a regular basis. I'm not exempt from this. Sometimes I can get in my own head of superiority because and I know you said you were going to end the side quest here. Sorry, but
let's keep going.
So we all live in our own heads. We all believe that we are part of the in crowd of the tribe, and this is why I think that humility is so important, because humility reminds you that we're all human and we can disagree, and you should hold to your convictions. Like, that's a good quality to have, regardless of what they are, whether you're Yasna or Dalinar or Shallan, like, you should hold to your convictions. However, based on what we've just uncovered, if Shallan pulls this off and steals the Soulcaster, then Shallan is actually the one committing a wrongdoing here, because Yasna has only been kind to her regardless of her religious beliefs.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. And you said something interesting just now, and I want to underscore it. You should be confident in what you believe. You should do research, whatever that looks like. You should be able to argue your position. And if you are very much opposed to another position and you are able to have a discussion or have a debate with that person, you better know their position well enough to argue against it and not a straw man or pull a red herring in your argument. You have to know where other people are coming from. The only way you know that is by interaction. And again, that research, whatever that looks like. But be confident in your belief. Don't be an arrogant prick about it. Mm-hmm. But be confident in your belief. Because if you don't know, if we really don't know anything, well, then shut up. Then go get your Xbox.
That's honestly, this is one of the reasons I love epistemology. Is that
leave the rest of us alone.
Yeah, and for anyone unfamiliar, epistemology is the philosophical study of the beginning of knowledge. So, like, why do you know that 2 + 2 is 4? And so you can literally start anywhere. This is what's fascinating me. You can start with any belief. Well, I know that the sky is blue. Okay, why? Well, because of this reason. Okay, but why is that reason true? Because of this reason. And you literally just keep going backwards, until you reach an end.
Yeah. Yeah. What I learned in seminary that was very foundational for me was everybody has a worldview, and everybody makes assumptions and works with presuppositions. So a religious person automatically has presuppositions that there is something outside the material world. A non-religious person has the presupposition that there is nothing outside the material world. And with those two presuppositions, both look at the same evidence, pieces of evidence, and come up with wildly different conclusions. Now, that doesn't mean that a religious person doesn't believe in gravity and a religious person doesn't believe in gravity, and a non-religious person really believes that gravity exists. That's all fifth grade rock throwing and, he said, she said, you're dumb bullcrap.
We're going to test out gravity today, kids. Pick up a rock.
That's unphilosophical, unintellectual nonsense. But everybody has a worldview, and that worldview is comprised of three things: epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. Epistemology is knowledge, study of knowledge. Metaphysics is study of reality. What do we know to be true? And ethics, what do we do with these data points? So that informs everything you know, and how you will look at the observable world, tangible and intangible. Tangible meaning that rock that fell off a cliff. That's a tangible. Intangible, immaterial things. I'm talking about logic, math, all that kind of stuff. How do you interact with those things, and what conclusions do you come with? So everybody has a worldview, and everybody has presuppositions that they're just there. And 98% of people, I think, don't even know that they're there. And that's maybe less, maybe, I don't know. But a lot of people don't know that they're there. And when they come to a political point of view, or they come to a religious point of view, or they just believe something, like a cultural thing that they believe is, this is the way we do it in America, this is the way we do it in Poland, whatever. They come with those things, that baggage, to everything that's in front of them. And without knowing that thing, you are going to be making the mistakes that Shallan is making here in the beginning, with assuming that Jasna is just garbage.
So I'm going to use this as a segue over to Kaladin. So what do we do when we are raised by someone like Lirin, who believes that you can never take someone's life justifiably? I would say that Lirin probably believes that there is no just war. I think that that's probably just a fair,
It sounds
fair
like it.
assumption. And
Yeah.
so then you have Kaladin over here, who was, raised with the trade that is surgeon. So he has the skills of medicine, and then he also got raised in the tradition of war for some years before he finds himself as a bridgeman. And now he is trying to. And what was the line from some earlier chapters where he said, "I'm trying to go back and find the man that I once was," or whatever it was. And so he has to take those two different versions of himself. And sometimes I like to cut my life up into versions of myself because, frankly, the person that I was when I was younger, in like living in New York and whatever, is a different version of me than I am now, and I understand the world differently, for better and worse in different categories. But Kaladin is wrestling with, okay, I'm trying to save my men, but if we give a broad synopsis here of what happens to him in these chapters, in this section, he practices his bridge runs with his men. He creates a new tactic that they use and a new strategy that they're going to try. Gaz starts scheming to try to get Kaladin killed. Kaladin has a flashback of having conversations with his dad when he was drunk. And then Kaladin grabs another bridge member who is Lopin, who's one-armed, which that doesn't seem super helpful in running a bridge. And then it culminates with them trying to run the side carry that they'd been practicing in a couple chapters. And Kaladin saves his men and gets a bunch of other people killed.
Like 200.
Yeah, like a bunch of people. And then he's strung up to die. Like, Kaladin now has to live with the consequences of his actions. But, like, when you're at the bottom rung of society and survival is your only goal, is that justifiable? Is it justifiable to do something for survival that ends up being a consequence for other people to get them killed? I don't know.
Would you steal a piece of bread to feed your family?
Right. That, is it that, did you ever watch The Twilight Zone?
Long time
ago, right? So
the black and white reruns.
Yeah, it's
when I was
an
a kid,
old show. I think that did a lot for society. This is a hot take a little bit. Maybe not a hot take, but it presented ethical dilemmas through story that people had to think about in weird ways. And there's this, I can't remember all the details for the episode, but philosophy has one of these same questions. Is it better to kill one person or cause one person harm to make the lives of 1,000 people better? Right? Like, it's a question that those of us who like to intellectually jerk the gherkin, like, want to think through, like, well, what are those 1,000 lives doing afterward? Is the one life, not creating a cure for cancer? And, like, we create all these thresholds and stuff, but I think it's actually a lot simpler of a question. Like, is one life more valuable than another? I don't know.
Well, I don't think it is. But if you're gonna,
So you hate Kaladin?
I do not hate Kaladin.
Okay.
And here's the thing. I think it's based on the information that you have in the moment where you're making those decisions. So if we're going to use that old philosophical, hypothetical question
the train trolley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 guy or 10 guys.
So can I just pause for a second? Let's do a little, I just want to explain this to the listeners. So the train trolley experiment or ethical dilemma is you are standing on a train track and you are standing next to the lever and you see a train coming. And if you pull the lever, you will veer the train away from the group of 5 people that are tied up on the railway, and it will go to a sub-track where there's only 1 person. That's the premise and kind of dilemma that we're talking about here. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So if you look at that, I think well, let me back up. So back to my point, you should be judged, for lack of a better term, on the information you have at the moment you're making that decision. And those kind of ethical dilemmas, they're good to get the brain firing, but at the end of the day, it's a hypothetical and it doesn't account for other things. If you're forced to make that decision and only that decision, that assumes that there's no other options. There's not a way to call the conductor. There's not a way to put a flag or an obstacle on the course warning the train. There's no other options. There's no, like, telephone next to the lever. And there's no alarm bells. And I'm a guy who worked for an organization that did training on trail derailment. So Fine. If we're going to make this hypothetical, let me add some reality to it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of other options. So just like the other
Real descriptive.
hypothetical, yeah, I know. That other hypothetical where there's, 4 men and they're all touching an elephant and they're all blind. And see, we don't know anything. because one
Perspective.
thing's-
Yeah,
it's
trunk, leg,
Yeah.
tail.
It's still an elephant, and they're blind. So why are we trusting them? So these ethical dilemmas, this philosophical,
the blind leading
they're-
the blind.
this philosophical hypotheticals are great. I'm not poo-pooing them at all. But there's always more than just that. So what do you know at the time of the decision that you're making? So does Kaladin really know that he's going to kill 200 plus people? No. He is doing the right thing by saving his men. Maybe he is ill-informed because of his lot and position in life at this current moment in it. And so he makes a decision. He saves his life. He wins over Bridge 4. He changes the lives of Bridge 4 forever. But yeah, a bunch of Light Eyes die, which he doesn't care about. And then a bunch of other Bridgemen die, which he does care about. But from our vantage point, and if we're going to be consistent, both have value. The Bridgemen and the Light Eyes both have value. So he gets a lot of people killed. So he made the wrong decision. His decision killed a lot of people. But he was acting out of what he knew was best for him and his men that he took on a duty to protect.
Right. It's true. It's tough. It's tough to make calls like that, but I think you make a really valid point is you need to you only can be within some realm of reason, you can only be judged by the information you had at the time. But I think that this is also important is to try to be aware of what you don't know.
Oh yeah.
It's an endless thing because there's 3 types of knowledge, and then I want to hear your take on Kaladin and where he's at, because this side quest is kind of like evolved.
Oh yeah.
You know what you know what you don't know. I don't know thermodynamics, not really. I don't know how a plane flies. I don't know aerodynamics. I don't know how exactly electricity works. I know things that I don't know. And then the third type of knowledge is you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes you can walk into a situation thinking you know that you know, and then you will get new information in the moment, and then you realize, oh no, I have no idea that these things were going on. Kaladin steps into a moment where he goes, oh no. As they did the side carry, as he saved his men, he looks back and he goes, oh, storms. I've just gotten hundreds of men killed because I ruined the plateau assault. Because he was too smart for the suffering that he was put into. And that got a bunch of people killed. Now, I don't think that's his fault necessarily, because like you said, he didn't know the information. But at some point, you're also still accountable for the information you did have and your actions that you took. And so now he's strung up to die. So lead us back into Bridge 4 and kind of your take on him, and we'll end that side quest that devolved and evolved and et cetera, et cetera.
So at the end of this section for our read of The Way of Kings, we find Kaladin, who's just realized that he's killed a bunch of people, or his actions got a bunch of people killed. And at the same time, he's won the respect and the loyalty of his men, for sure. And so Gaz and Lamaril come riding up, and they're like, what are you doing? What did you do? And so Kaladin takes the blame and says, well, sorry, Bright Lord, I was trying to save me and my team. And because Lamaril and Gaz were plotting against Cal, and Cal kind of knew it, he manipulates them into not killing him, because he says, if you kill me, nobody will find out that it was just me. You will be blamed. Because in Alethi culture, the Bright Eyes always will take the blame. They're held accountable at the end. And so Lamaril knows this and decides just to beat him up. And while he's knocked out, Kaladin, he's actually strung up, facing eastward to face the high storm that's coming. But Lamaril is executed because of this cultural norm, or this religious norm, or whatever.
Yeah.
The Light Eyes, the Bright Lords, will be held accountable. So he's executed because at the end of the day, he's the one who's responsible for Cal's actions, according to the Alethi. And Kaladin is going to be made an example, and he's strung up to face the high storm. And I found this 2 sentences at the end of the chapter just beautifully written. So, staring at the raging, blustering, churning wave of wind-pushed water and debris, Kaladin felt as if he were watching the end of the world descend upon him. He took a deep breath, the pain in his ribs forgotten, as the storm wall crossed the lumber yard in a flash and slammed into him. And the chapter ends.
Yeah.
Right before this, his men come out to meet with him and to say goodbye to him. And he gives Rock and Tefet something to tell the men. They're like, well, come out after the storm. And if I'm alive, then, then everything's as it should. Or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And then he accepts his fate. He accepts his fate.
Yeah, he tells Rock and Teft, and he goes, after the storm, come out and look at me. And they go back inside, and Teft is muttering under his breath that he himself is a coward. And Syl is not happy with Cal. She's like, that was a lie. And he's like, no, it's basically a wager on the end game, or the long game, where if they come out and I'm dead, they'll go, we knew he was going to die. But if they come out and I'm alive, it gives them hope. And frankly, when you're at a state in life where you are just trying to survive, and I think we talked about this in an earlier episode, you need hope. You need something. You need purpose. I think purpose and hope are tied together, where purpose gives you the opportunity to set your eyes on the horizon and say that there is a hope for a better time, even when the world is crashing down on you, whatever that looks like for your circumstances. And so, yeah, Kaladin, when I first read this, I was like, oh man, he's going to kill this character that we just grew half a book. He's dead. That's it. And I was like, well, what's he going to, maybe we switch characters. Maybe maybe Rock and Teft end up taking over because we've grown enough with them that something could happen. It's a tough place to end. But
yeah,
go for it.
I was listening to it on audiobook. So the way I prepare for this podcast is I listen to it on audiobook while I'm driving. Then I'll go back in my Kindle. And so when I heard this, I was like, wow. And 34 was the end point for this episode. So I stopped listening there, and then I read ahead a little bit later, but I stopped listening there, and I was like, wow, what a way to end the chapter.
I tried to pick chapter segments that would do best to make our reading segments have cliffhangers to draw us back in. Some of them are better than others, but things are picking up again. So Cal might be dead.
Cal might be dead because he's in the middle of a hurricane, tied by his feet to a roof of a building, and he has a couple broken ribs and other injuries and a concussion. So, yeah. So here we are at the end of this portion.
Way of Kings, Part 4, Side Quest, Episode 9, if I got my count right.
I think so. I think it's Episode 9.
That's it. That's the episode. Next time, we're looking at another 10-ish chapters, where we look at chapters 35 through 45, and next episode will be halfway through the book, halfway through our journey, halfway. I haven't gotten confirmation yet for the fun thing that I want to do on episode 10, so waiting for that to happen, but really looking forward to pulling it off because I think it'll be a fun surprise for you, for me, it's not going to be a surprise for me because I'm planning it, but for you, for the listeners. Yeah, so tell us in the comments we went off on some weird side quests, so
oh my gosh, yep.
Yeah, that's I take full responsibility for my actions on that one because I definitely led us down that path. But what did you think about this section of The Way of Kings? What did you think about our side quests? What should we read next? All of the questions. Are you having fun in The Way of Kings? Are you not reading The Way of Kings and instead just doing it through ancillary through us? Whatever. Anyway, that's
that works. I approve.
Okay. All right, great. It sounds better in Russian. All right. Catch you on the next one.
All right. Goodbye, good people.